Hi guys, here is a breakdown of 8 athletes from a list of most viewed in the World Athletics Championships Oregon 2022. Now before I start, this data consisted of me finding the top 10 videos on each athlete by the number of views towards the last 30 days of the event. This information came from doing a simple YouTube search, nothing complicated. It does not include cable TV, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, or Instagram videos. None of that. And if I had more time, sure, I could have gathered more information. Now, this data set could change tomorrow. For example, if NBC decides to dump 100 Shelly-Ann Fraser Pryce videos on YouTube relative to everyone else, then her numbers will be inflated. And you guys are free to interpret this information however you see fit. And yes, I also included Sha'carri Richardson, who came in around 7th place. I simply stopped at 8 people because the data was enough to try and gather information. Sha'carri ranked 7th at about 1 million views for the month, and that is pretty good for an athlete who did not qualify. But I'll talk about her shortly as her data is really interesting. Other athletes around that range of 1 million views, which I did not depict in this diagram, would be Toby of Nigeria, who won her hurdles event, and any other foreign athletes who came in first in your individual events. Those foreign athletes can thank NBC Sports for their boost in viewership. They would fall somewhere between Sha'carri Richardson and Femke Bol in the total number of views. For the men's side, it is kind of safe to say that Lyles had the most coverage, and everyone on the men's side came side by side with him or under him in terms of views. Noah's view count ranked right behind Abbysteiner and Sydney, which goes to show you that women, track and field were the attention at this event. And you might ask, well, why didn't I account for the other runners in the women's 4x100 or the 4x400 or any of the other events? And the simple answer is that the time and resources needed to make this 15-minute video that you are listening to does not allow for it. It is apparent that the coverage of the most popular men and female athletes did cast a spotlight on the other legs, but it did not stand as proof that the less known individual legs of the competition had enough to stand on their own in terms of total views. I'm going to start with Sha'carri Richardson just to get her audience out of the way. Her publicity within the last 30 days came mostly from outside mainstream media. This was from independent content creators. You had O'Shea Duke Jackson, J-Day Black, Burris TV, Black Babble, J-Boss Sports Trends, and Strictly Dancehall. Whether the publicity in her audience was critical, that's beside the point for now. We will save that for another conversation. Sha'carri gained about 1.4 million views in the last 30 days while not qualifying in any event. The only prominent news outlet that covered her was SpeakforYourself-FoxSports, which accounted for about 40% of her views. Now, for someone to get that type of attention and stay somewhat relevant is fascinating, but we are going to get into this halfway towards the middle and end of this video. Next person on our list is Femke Bol. The Dutch track and field athlete came behind Sha'carri in terms of views. Top 10 videos for her came under 1 million, which I was surprised. I thought it would be more. She ran a good mixed 4x400 race. 45% of her views came from NBC Sports. The remainder came from FlowTrack, Norse Jonah, Fast Misha Official, Amer Kukan TV, and Wonder Diamond League. Regardless, this view count might be pretty good for that Dutch audience. She won 2nd place in the 4x400 meter mixed race and also 2nd place in the 400 meter hurdles. Now I want to switch my attention over to Abbysteiner. Her top 10 videos in the last 30 days were just shy of 10 million, which is crazy. That number was 9,936,000. 84% of her views came from NBC Sports. Other independent content creators were FlowTrack, AJ Concepts, The Sprint Project, Athletic Focus, and Total Running Productions accounted for 16% of her views, which is impressive in terms of competition with legacy media. Abbysteiner came in 5th place in the women's 200 final and took home gold in both the women's 4x100 meter and the 4x400 meter events. The second most viewed athlete on my list was Sydney. Her top 10 videos in the last 30 days were just shy of 6 million views. 80% of her views came from NBC Sports. Other independent content creators like World Athletics and Total Running Productions accounted for 20% of her views. Now this is the interesting part. Clearly a lot of people came to watch her events as well. And there was one event that overlapped with Abbysteiner, which was the women's 4x400 meters. So if Abby's audience were just watching Abby for the first time, chances are they came across Sydney as well. Sydney took gold in the 400 meter hurdles and gold in the 4x400 meters. Next, the third most viewed athlete on my list was Noah Lyles with about 6 million views. 64% of his views came from NBC Sports. The other 36% came from Total Running Productions, World Athletics, AJ Concepts, Total Running Productions, and Vice TV. There were other male athletes that came up on my list slightly below Noah, so they did pretty well too. Noah took gold in the 200 meter race and broke Michael Johnson's record at the 1996 Atlantic Olympics. Fourth on my list of most viewed was Shelly-Ann Fraser Pryce with about 5 million views. 45% came from NBC Sports. The remaining 55% came from a variety of content creators. That included World Athletics, Nationwide 90 FM, Total Running Productions, AJ Concepts, Calabar Life, and Unseen Sports TV. She clearly has a wider net. And right beside her at 5th place on my list is Shericka Jackson with about 4 million views. About 40% of these views came from NBC Sports. The remaining 60% came from other content creators like Island Girl Sports TV, Athletic Focus, Nationwide 90 FM, Unseen Sports TV, Flow Track, Total Running Productions, AJ Sports, and Track HQ. And last on my list is Allyson Felix, bronze winner in the mixed 4x100 meters and gold in the women's 4x400 meters by participating in the heat that qualified the women for the 4x400 meter final in which they won gold. Great way to end her career instead of finishing it in the mixed 4x400 meter event. About 66% of her views came from NBC Sports, and the other 40% came from other content creators. She reached close to 3 million views, which is very impressive. Those other content creators include O'Neill React TV, Blurred, Flowtrack, Basketball, Blurred Again, and Jamaica Entertainment Feed. Now the biggest question to ask is, what does this data tell us? What can we get from it? First, let's acknowledge the elephant in the room. From the videos I have looked at, there was clearly an interest in Abbysteiner. Her popularity did draw an audience into track and field and gave them exposure to other athletes. The online qualitative sentiment did show an interest back into the sport. But quantitative, to what extent? I do not know, as much research and polling should be conducted. The second item is, women's track and field showed massive interest to the viewing population compared to the men, despite have broken previous historical records. But I cannot confirm that again because I don't have the data to compare this against the previous competition for this short video. Now on these 2 points already, if I was to bet on Abbysteiner and women's track and field breaking new highs in terms of popularity compared to the men's track and field, then I would have to say yes if this was the only data set I could lean on. The third most important item this data tells me, which is really important, is that independent social media content creators like Total Running Productions, AJ Concepts, and everyone else I have mentioned, yes, even for Sha'carri Richardson, all those guys were responsible for 30% of these individual athletes' social engagement combined. I believe that this is an important component where someone can make a video to bring attention to athletes and the sport as well. But what is also extremely important to note here is that the barrier of entry to compete with a billion-dollar network like NBC is not out of their reach. And in terms of marketing, big endorsement brands and athletes should establish some type of relationship with these smaller entities where appropriate. Some of these channels might not be the right audience for marketers based on your audience and products. And that is apparent when you compare Abbysteiner, Shelly-Ann Fraser Pryce, all the way down to Sha'carri. It's a 360. So know what you are selling and what type of brand you are trying to endorse. But there is another important observation from this data. And though numbers never lie, they do tell a story. Abbysteiner and Sydney McLaughlin's views were tilted heavily towards the mainstream broadcaster NBC Sports with 84% and 81% respectively. This might be a good thing in terms of popularity near term, but being so dominant by one media conglomerate like NBC Sports can also be risky, especially going into the off-season or if NBC decides to focus on something else. Reading further into this, Noah and Allyson stand much better at about 60% dominance. Shelly is balanced at about 50%, and the other participants here are further decentralized. Now again, it took me 10 minutes to pull each of your videos and make this 15-minute video. So keep in mind there are trillions of bytes of data that have not been factored into this equation.